everyone. This is Leilani Cawthon. Welcome. Glad to have you here. I think this is our 24th webinar of the season, and it's been really interesting. We did a survey nationally before we did this particular tour of 8 events, and we had over 18,000 people respond, indicating which topics they would want. And now there's other data emerging, which is why we're talking about this particular thing, which is overcoming your public's reasons not to return. It's kind of getting scary out there. I'm going to share with you a little bit of that data. There's a lot to this topic, and it has a lot to do with what I'm going to ask Tony to speak about first, because it sort of tees up the conversation. It has a lot to do with how you draw people back, how they start to recognize really the sophistication that you can have on campus now that they've all been exposed to remote learning, some of them in good ways, some of them in not good ways. The stories are numerous in both directions, but how they can be comfortable and not fearful and all of that kind of thing. So Tony, I'm going to click forward unless you want me to give you the screen.
No, you can go ahead and click through for us. I think it's a very relevant topic right now, and one that I'm having with a lot of superintendents around the country and a lot of district leaders around the country, just in terms of what is returning to school going to look like for people. And I think as different states are providing direction on what their expectations are, we got a lot of that from last week. Also, right now, I think school districts are putting together their plans for what that's going to be. I think flexibility is going to be the name of the game, to be able to be prepared for a number of different scenarios, and being able to be prepared for those and to be able to effectively communicate those things out to the public is going to be incredibly important. From our standpoint, we're very focused on that as well. One of the things that seems to be a common denominator is the different models that we're going to see. One would be the scenario one, which would be face-to-face, where teachers and students are all back in the classroom again. Social distancing may be going on, the teacher may be wearing a mask, students may be wearing a mask, but from a physical standpoint, everybody is back in the classroom. I was with a number of superintendents last week, and that is their primary plan as of right now, based upon where they live. The second scenario is more of a hybrid model, and hybrid means a lot of things to a lot of people, but in this case, I think what it means is we have both students learning physically, meaning maybe half the classroom is now back, but then there's also a component of students that are virtual, and maybe it's one teacher teaching both at the same time, both physically in the classroom, but having a contingent that are virtual as well. The third scenario is where you might have a remote teacher. We know that there's scenarios where a teacher may have a pre-existing health condition, or the teacher might have a family member that has a pre-existing health condition that might make them less able to get back into the classroom, but we still need that credentialed teacher to be able to be teaching. So they may be remote, but there might be students in the classroom, and there might be a teacher aid or support in place from a classroom management perspective, keeping roll, etc. And then the fourth scenario is what we experienced the last 3 months of the school year, where teachers and students are all working virtually together. So the one thing we do know, and where we're really involved in working with a lot of districts on right now, is that the mask, a teacher wearing a mask, students wearing a mask, is going to create a problem for speech intelligibility. There's going to be a loss of visual cues. About 40 to 50% of speech can be gleaned simply through reading lips, and having that component taken away is going to create an increased challenge for comprehension by students. The mask is also going to be a barrier that's going to reduce audibility or loudness of the teacher's voice, decrease in terms of the intelligibility or clarity, and then also increase teacher vocal strain as they're trying to raise their voice even more than they might normally in order to reach those students that are in the back of the room. So we're working with a lot of districts right now as they work through that issue. So what we do is simply provide a microphone on a teacher, just on a lanyard around their neck, that allows them to speak with a regular speech and make sure that their voice is evenly distributed throughout the classroom, no matter where they are. So this first scenario right here kind of just highlights that, where all the students are physically in the classroom and the teacher's wearing a microphone, their voice is distributed for all those students. Students may be further away due to social distancing. The teacher may need to be further away from them, but their voice is still going to be able to be heard. The next scenario is more that hybrid or that split classroom, where you have students both physically in the classroom, but also virtually learning remotely. And we have a way to be able to connect through our media connector to make sure that the teacher's voice is being heard clearly, both virtually and physically in the classroom. The teacher may not want to be tethered directly in front of that computer at all times. This allows the teacher with a little bit more flexibility to be able to be within the classroom, but make sure that those students in that remote setting are hearing the teacher clearly, regardless of how far they are in proximity. The next solution is just around where students in the classroom need to be able to be heard by students that are virtual or within the classroom. And this is a solution that we have built specifically around the return to school model that's happening in September. And this is our Tap to Talk solution. It's where each individual student up to 12 in the classroom has their own individual microphone. They can select and press that microphone so that they can be heard both within the classroom and virtually. There's no need to be passing around microphones. Each student can have their own within the classroom so that they can be heard. This also then allows students that are remote to be able to speak and to be able to be heard within the classroom too, so the audio component is taken care of on both sides. And then the final scenario is just where a teacher is remote. And we might have a teacher aide in the classroom, and we're able to bring in that teacher's voice clearly into the classroom with two-way audio connecting between the two and through the interactive display. So audio is going to be a challenge in classrooms as we return to the classroom, whether we're doing it virtually or whether we're doing it with some hybrid model. We have our RedCat system, which you see there on the left, that is really popular right now because it is a plug and play, a very quick implementation into the classroom. We also have installed solutions like our TopCat and our 955. And then we're able to add in the student microphones in that for the student engagement piece. And Leilani, if you want to go to just that final slide. We have our Activate solution for student engagement, where the teacher can then select individual students to be able to speak out for the entire group, or our Tap to Talk solution, where the power and ability is in the student's hand to simply press their own personal microphone and to be amplified. So if you're thinking about these various challenges and the return to school scenario, let us help you. You might have existing systems or types of solutions that we can incorporate in and bring in both that virtual piece as well as the physical piece. And hopefully these are tools that can help enable your schools to just be prepared for various scenarios that they're going to face as we return.
Okay, great. And Tony, I've held these, the handhelds, the Tap to Talks in my hand. They seem to me pretty easy to disinfect.
Yeah, we have guidelines on disinfecting all of our solutions. That's been a topic that's been discussed with a lot of our existing solutions. And yeah, they're very easy to disinfect if they're going to be passed between students. And we even have guidelines for that and recommendations. So yeah, that's one thing that we're very cognizant of. We want to keep things in individual students' hands, make it as personal as possible so that things aren't being passed around. But when they are and when they need to be, we can make sure that, the sanitation piece is taken care of.
Good to know. Okay, so we're wanting to make sure we share what's happening in the market. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over some of our top concerns. So let me give you a little bit of data as the Learning Council. So first of all, you'll see in the news media that there's a lot of really afraid parents who are saying they don't want to come back. And then there's also a lot of parents who desperately want normal back. And that actually, in the surveys that we've seen, is a higher number of individuals. So if you can hear from both sides, but technically the data is showing people want school back. So now the issue is, for those other ones that you're not hearing from, or you've surveyed them and you think, okay, they're telling me they're not coming back. What do you do about that? So here's the rest of the data. So the predicted opt-out percentages, and this is one of the surveys, but again, this is one of it's a smaller total number in survey. 40% of parents are saying they're likely to take up homeschooling or virtual schooling. So here's the credibility behind some of that. Most of the companies in this space, digital curriculum, digital libraries of various things, we've been talking to them as Learning Council. A lot of them have picked up 1 million seats, 2 million seats, practically overnight when quarantine's happening. The consumer market side has been just unbelievable growth. So parents have been shopping and they're finding best in class. And they're saying to themselves, if they're that homeschooling type of parent, they're like, I could put this together myself. There's also a tremendous amount of advertising by the online charter schools happening right now. And they're trying to lure away as many parents as they possibly can. So these are the conundrums. Also, many parents are frustrated with how remote learning was done in some places. I mean, we had superintendents on previous webinars talking about parents and students complaining of getting 32 different calls in one day from various teachers, Zoom meetings happening all day, every day, Zooms being scheduled over the top of each other. There's been a really big disarray. And then some districts who just sort of shut down altogether and did nothing, or they only sent out paper packets. So there's a fear of loss of learning all the way around. So the possibility is a little bit like Tony was talking about, and I'm going to speak particularly to California because they have 4, and both of our superintendents today are from California. They have 4 models that are being pushed by the state, and that has to do with that top one, the hybrid model. It's a 2-day rotation model, something called the AB blended learning model, something called the looping structure model, and then early late staggered schedules. Other states have different definitions of hybrid models, like Atlanta has a lot of Friday online learning days, particularly for their high schools. There's another model emerging called micro schools, where you take your huge campuses and you sort of cut them up artificially, or you rent outside space and you corral certain population, maybe a grade or an area, so that you're segmenting out how much virus could spread by microschooling. And then, of course, hybrid with more online school, melded in, going to fully online as needed, sort of toggle switching it from classroom environment to the fully online. And then going all the way as far as personalized learning plans. And then what Learning Council has been talking about for over a year now, the idea of Uberizing learning and causing the human intersection via algorithmic workflow. So those are the possibilities. And of course, then you have to consider as a school all your things. This is a map I'm showing you of all the things on the playing field in EdTech to try to go hybrid. I'm not going to get into detail on it right now. I've done that in the past, but it sort of gives you a little bit of an idea of, maybe all grades have all these different digital learning things. Then you have your learning management system and all this other stuff that you have to consider. The sophistication that schools are looking at right now in districts is off the charts, and many of them are really struggling with dealing with it. My suggestion is start where you can, do what you can, don't try to swallow it all at the same time. So in terms of promoting your campus, these are the 5 areas Learning Council has identified that are critical. Tony talked about one of them because we think that a good portion, probably 65–70% of schools are still going to attempt the same model they've always have, which is whole group model. And so you have to look at the technologies that allow you to socially distance on campus. And then the hands-on projects PBL, that's a really attractive thing to draw back your homeschoolers to say, I'm a parent, I'm not going to buy a $7,000 robot. I'm not going to buy those expensive microscopes that plug into laptops or telescopes and all the other science equipment. I need to send my kid to a place where he can be exposed or she can be exposed to the things that I can't afford to do. And those things need to be marketed right now by schools. There's also the flipped classroom and using really adaptive digital curriculum for asynchronous learning, where the curriculum is carrying a lot of the weight of the distribution of the actual knowledge. And then purposeful togetherness, really thinking about what you're doing when you are together, and anything else that's not typically available at home, like the expensive desktops with dual screens for coding, video editing, computer graphics. All that stuff has huge money behind it right now in the CARES Act with the workforce development grants and basically everything else that you can sort of apply for if you're not getting it already as a direct distribution. So I want to come back to Dr. Michelle Rodriguez and Cheryl Jordan. So happy to have them with us because California is really kind of leading the way and talking about a model shift more than I've seen in other places right now. So Michelle, you're unmuted. Can you introduce yourself and kind of talk about what's happening right now? What happened first when you went into quarantine, and then now where you're at in sort of leading forward?
Certainly. So yes, it's great to be here. So I'm Michelle Rodriguez, Superintendent at Pajaro Valley Unified School District. So we service a little over 21,000 students. We have about 2,500 employees here. The majority of our students are from vulnerable student populations. So 83% of them are either students of poverty, English learners, or students with special needs. I mention all that because that is part of our equity agenda and our goal of always ensuring that we are looking at it from the standpoint of our most vulnerable student, which I think points to your overall question of why students need to be able to have access to physical school. So we did close down, like the majority of the state. We closed down on March 13th. We were able to rapidly begin distance learning. So we started providing 15,000 Chromebooks, 1,000 hotspots, which is now blossoming to a total of 4,000 hotspots for our students. And we gave a Chromebook to each child 2nd through 12th grade. We provided Chromebooks to our K-1 students and students with special needs as well, but that was not 100%. What we tried to do is have continuity of learning as much as possible so that our students continue to learn. So I'm a big proponent and have been a big proponent, which I think is supporting our reentry, to ensure that this wasn't about enrichment and this wasn't about review, but it was about new learning applications. And so because we have a personalized learning as one of our 4 large levers, we were able to really take that and build off of that as a strength. And so have a good process for our students. And then I'm sure later on we can talk about what we're going to do to bring children back.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, let's come back to that so I can have Cheryl also introduce herself. Cheryl, can you talk about also kind of what happened with you March 13th forward?
Sure. I'm Cheryl Jordan, and in Milpitas Unified, where we have 10,200 kids, about 33% of them are either low income or English learners. And what we did was on March 13th, we met with our leadership and what I call my associations roundtable. So that would be the leaders of all of our associations. And we actually were planning for the potential of going distance learning when later that afternoon it was determined that we were going to do it beginning on Monday. So we gave our staff 3 days to prepare, and they launched into our what we call MUSD Educate Everywhere distance learning on that Thursday. And they invested almost 4,000 pre-launch hours total. And from March through the beginning of May, when we were keeping track, our team members had invested over 10,000 hours in learning hours for how to tackle online learning with different types of applications, learning how to do Zoom meetings, Google meetings, and where about 25% of our staff is very skilled in using Google Classroom because that's the learning management system that we have available to our staff. Most had not used it, especially at the elementary level. But by the middle of May, that number of team members who felt a little more skilled in the area of distance learning had edged up. And so by the end of spring, I only had about 5% of my team members who still felt very discombobulated in the world of distance learning. And so that's how we prepared our team members, just in the numbers. And then as far as making sure that our students had digital devices and Wi-Fi, within the first 4 days, we delivered about 1,500 Chromebooks, and then by the end of the second week had ensured that all had Chromebooks, and so that was an additional 4,300 Chromebooks that we moved out. And we used it as an opportunity for implementing one-to-one at our high school. We have one comprehensive high school, which has 3,200 students in it. And so going forward, we will now have one-to-one. And so that's the numbers for that. As far as Wi-Fi and connection, we had to do a number of patchwork initiatives everywhere, from providing hotspots And we had difficulties getting hotspots. We were only able to get 40. So we did a lot of consultation with neighbors asking if they would provide guest accounts. We went up to, we're by the East Calaveras Hills, and went up into the hills for some of the families to actually install our version of Wi-Fi access so that they could have it. And as I shared in another webinar yesterday, and we all feel it, it's right in front of our faces how important it is that our students, when we're talking about equity, that our students and their families have access to Wi-Fi just as much as they have access to PG&E and water. And to that end, we're working with our city leaders to figure out how the city can work with us and take this on as a whole community effort to ensure that all of our residents, including our senior citizens who are also left in the digital dark, have access to Wi-Fi.
Yeah, these are really big things. So you guys both have really just sort of armed up for the going remote war with lots of machines, lots of attention to Wi-Fi. Those are brilliant moves. So now you're probably muddling through all of the things that have to come together for the flexibility in the curriculum side, the software side, even beyond, the basics of LMSs and Google and Zoom. Let's talk about those first and then come around to appeals that you might want to be making or are thinking of making for the fall that you can tell parents to attract them back. So what's happening on the software side beyond? Because, teachers will have like 25 other logins nobody knows about to systems and apps and things. What's happening for that? Dr. Rodriguez, you want to answer that first?
Sure. Yeah, so we do use Google Classroom, and we use Clever as well. So we have a single sign-on for our students so they're able to easily access all of our apps. We have really narrowed the number of applications which we are supporting at a district level so that we can use it efficiently, effectively, and we can also track progress of students well. So for each grade span, it does vary. So it's not always K-12. We were identified as one of 5 in the nation to be a pilot for the MAP Accelerator through Khan Academy. So we do use the MAP Accelerator because we use MAP, Measures of Academic Progress, as well. And so our students are using that, and we're seeing great success with that. As well, for mathematics, we are using ST Math, so spatial temporal math, as well through Mind Institute. The reason why those two are both important for me is a couple of things. One is that they have great dashboards in order for us to track redundancy of learning, which is important to me. And then also we're able to look to see progress towards grade level standards, and we know that our students perform well on that. At the secondary level for math, we use ALEX. And for us, I think we had always, before even the closure, we believed in a 3-part rotation, even at the high school level. And so our students were already engaged in these programs. And so it really was a fairly easy transition for us in terms of curriculum wise. Also in language arts, we use a combination of Footsteps to Brilliance, which is a community-wide program that's in English and Spanish that's available to every single resident in our zip code. So we span 5 cities. So that is meant more for our younger students. And then we use Lexia Power Up and Achieve 3000 for the high school level. For just using for practice, we use Newsvilla as well. But the powerful of all of that is that we're able to really track the usage and be able to see what our students are using, how they're using it, and how they're applying that learning through the use of Google Classroom. And so those are the main programs that we're using here within the school district.
That's great. That's a really good mix. Okay, Cheryl, do you want to also reply in the same line of thought?
Sure. In our district, Google platform is definitely what holds all of our capacity for providing distance learning. And we have many of those applications like GG Math and iReady. iReady is one of our big assessment and learning tools. Khan Academy, all of those different types of applications that are available, we have those. The thing is that what we were really looking at is how do we provide some engagement between the learner and the teacher. And we were really interested in many of our students were engaged and to what extent. So we discovered that we had 90, and keeping track of our data, we had 96% of our elementary students were engaged on average each week and 93% of our high school students. So that left about 550 students who were not regularly engaged during the week. And we really stressed the importance of either going in person to find out what was happening, what was holding the student back from being engaged, phone calls, of course, emails and texts. And those classrooms where they had the higher percentage of students who were engaged are the classrooms where the teachers really took time to do asynchronous learning, meaning that they had their class with them for regular meetings live and connected with them in that way. Also, they did a lot of project-based learning and in some cases even cross-grade or cross-curricular project-based learning opportunities, so that we were looking at how we could engage learners with learners and learners with their teachers.
That's great. So, okay, so now let's head into this overcomingness with this. I want to preface it with this one point. I'm sure you guys both are aware of Lammersville ISD. They're one of the Learning Council's EduJedi award-winning districts. They had this interesting thing with their new high school where they changed their schedule. They were sort of pre-COVID-19 altering time and space. So you don't have to be physically in the school if you're their high schooler. You could still be on the football team. You should still come in for the science labs kinds of thing. They had rolling drop off in the morning. And so, you could basically come in all the way up till 9 o'clock. And then in the middle of the day, they carved out a 2-hour window with alternate slots for teachers to have office hours so that the homeschoolers in the area could now reattach themselves to the district and come in and meet.
I think she accidentally went offline.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm back. I think
Yep.
Okay, great.
Internet trouble. Anyway, I was talking about Lammersville ISD. So their
Yes.
flexible model really drew in a lot more homeschoolers, but it leans really heavily on tech adaptation like that. And they marketed it that way. They marketed that flexibility to bring people in. So what are your thoughts now in terms of your communication pattern to your public to both overcome their fears as well as represent ideologically the technological shift that will sort of plant in their minds as the public, like, I'm not going to do that at home. I better make sure I go back to school. That helps them overcome their fears. So what are your plans in that vein, Dr. Rodriguez?
Yeah, sure. So we're releasing our contingency plan today, actually, and so our public will be able to begin to do the survey on it from a standpoint on Friday. They'll be able to start doing it. I do want to say that we are going to be offering a K-12 virtual academy as part of the package of what we're providing. But what I will say is when I think about why parents want their children either to come or they're fearful of having their children come, there's a couple of things that really it's a challenge to replicate within the virtual space. So I do believe in personalized learning and I also believe in 24/7 learning. So I believe that children can continue to learn. So that's the positive, the hybrid model. But when you think about it, there's 4 things that are a challenge to replicate. One, the relationship building. And I think when we surveyed our parents, our students, our staff, district-wide, no matter what type of stakeholder you are, their biggest challenge that they said that they had was feelings of isolation. And so when I think about what you guys were coining as purposeful togetherness, I think that relationship building and really having a connection with someone can be a challenge when you don't have any physical connection. I'm not saying touching wise, but just physical presence. And so I think relationships is important. The second one, I think, is in terms of authentically assessing children. So, of course, our online platforms can assess children, but I think that there are many, many things that a test cannot, or a program cannot effectively evaluate when we're really thinking about authentic learning, especially with our younger students. I think all of these things that I'm talking about are amplified when we're talking about our smallest of children that are 5, 6, 7 years old. So I think really being able to understand deeply where their unfinished learning is important to us. And I think that was important to us even prior. We not only have students who had initial learning gaps, but we also now have unfinished learning on top of those learning gaps. And so we really need to be able to authentically assess them so that we can accelerate them and reduce redundancy of learning. Third is really regarding targeted instruction, specifically in the area of foundational literacy. We did continue to do foundational literacy small group instruction. We use SIPs for that, and it's a mastery-based program. But what we found is it's extremely challenging to provide corrective feedback to children and to really be able, we reduced it down to 3-4 students that were online at a time doing it virtually. But what we did see when we looked at our data is that students didn't accelerate as quickly as they did when they were in the classroom in terms of really understanding that foundational literacy. And then from an older standpoint, we have what we call signature pathways here, which are linked to our college and career technical education. And whether it's agricultural science, where they're actually working with animals that are on our premises, and the children, don't worry, are still taking care of them using social distancing. But whether it's the agricultural science or it's our biotech labs, those are hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of technology that we have within those classrooms and those labs or those outdoor structures that we could not replicate at home. So yes, we did send them, for example, we sent them a computer kit, and they had, very similar to the Raspberry Pi, we sent them a computer kit, each child and they worked on it from home, and we did as much as we could. But to be able to actually replicate what we're doing in our signature pathways, whether it's our culinary arts or other, we were able to replicate it to a point, but it was in the 3 months we were off, we would have done multiple projects during that time. Really allowed them to go deep. And in this case, we only were able to accomplish one. So what we're trying to do is help people to understand how thoughtful and thorough we are in terms of the health and safety of their child, so that those that don't want to come back to school due to the concerns with health and safety really see not only our collaboration with our unions and our community partners and our parents, but also they're able to see in detail really how specific and how we are going to ensure the safety of their child. And then on top of that, which is our second tenet, is to ensure that students are receiving high quality instruction. And I will stop there, and Cheryl can continue. If you would like me to go on more, I can later on.
That's great. I love your 4 points there. I took the fourth point as your thoughtful and thorough health safety part. And I think that's going to be huge.
Yes, I'm sorry. I should have.
Yeah, people need to hear that, if they're at home, they need to, they'll ask you questions, right? Are you using Lysol? What are you using? So yeah, I love that as a fourth girl. Okay, Cheryl, Can you also talk about those same sort of concepts? You know, how are you communicating to draw back fearful public?
Sure, and I really appreciate what Michelle had to say, and in particular, what she talked about with learning being available 24/7 and finding ways to assure the parents that teachers are doing all they can to make distance learning relevant and impactful and robust. And we have communicated many times in many different ways on a almost at first daily basis and then down to a few times a week basis, so that our public and especially our parents, that they came to trust that we really do have the best interests of kids and parents and staff at heart. And it's in that communication, if we aren't figuring out how to communicate in ways, as Michelle mentioned, purposeful partners, I think you said, or purposeful relationship. If we're not doing that, then it allows people to fall back on their anxieties, and sometimes those anxieties become so real for them that it's hard to get through that emotion. And so what we've been talking about as we're moving towards phasing in 2021 is the importance of health and safety of everybody, and especially kind of flipping it on its head, in this case, our team members. And we need to assure that our team members' health is good, because if we have a large number who are not healthy because of COVID, then we have a number of learners who will be without a teacher. So I use that as one of the points in talking with parents about why we're going to phase in and begin the school year with everybody still in 100% distance learning, as we ensure that our various hybrid models, all very similar to what you shared already, are ready to go. And also that allows for our teachers to make personal contact with the families and also with their students to make sure that they understand what tools are going to be used. One of the frustrations that we found is that we have teachers using different tools, and in a family that has more than one child, with teachers using different tools and different expectations, that added to their frustration. And so we are also looking to make sure we're balancing the needs of our parents, students, and team members, meaning that we want to make sure our parents understand that we truly do see them as the child's first teacher, and that as we're looking at to true authentic engagement, this is it. And our parents are really our front line in helping us to ensure that during distance learning time, our kids have what they need, and our parents need to feel that they're supported by us, just as our team members do. And we want to ensure that we have equitable access to quality learning experiences, and that goes again to the relationship piece and the making learning something that isn't just passed off to one of the many programs that we could all have our kids assigned to for the entire day if necessary. But we all know that the teacher, that personal connection, is something that can't be replaced. And so it's how do you go about making sure that that's there, and wanting to be flexible in how we provide the distance learning and where we're working. And just as Michelle said, the social, emotional, and wellness of everyone is paramount. And so we have a subcommittee focused on mental health and parent support and teacher support and student support. And when I say teacher support, I mean all of those in our education system who help to provide teaching and learning. So by ensuring that we're touching on all the 5 of those areas as we communicate and provide parents and also team members with the opportunity to be a part of the conversation, whether that be in surveys or small groups, or actually participating on our advisory task force or in our task force subcommittees as we're planning, that's how we're pushing through those sentiments of fear and either not wanting to be 100% in distance learning or have anything to do with distance learning, or the flip side of being fearful of any kind of in-person contact.
That's awesome leadership that you guys are both doing. And I really like the fact that, you know, Cheryl, you just talked also about the frequency of the communication that's needed. So as a leader in a district, your community creation is not just with your teachers and students, it's with the whole community. It's all those parents and getting everybody involved in it. And this is sort of a dimensional shift at a level that we've never seen before. So you guys are both riding a bucking bronco of change, and I'm proud of you. I want to make sure that we go back to asking anybody that's now listening in, please put in your questions for the panelists so we can call on you and have you ask whatever question you want to ask. But I want to go now to the fact that probably Michelle and Cheryl, you guys are going to do a lot of on campus in the future. What are your thoughts about how that's going to look? Tony shared sort of like what you could do with audio. There's a lot of permutations in this conversation, you know, putting lines on the floor and signage and plastic barriers everywhere and everybody wearing masks and hand sanitizer on every wall so you can use it. What are your thoughts and what are you trying to put together going into the fall?
So for us, we transport about a fourth of our students by bus. So for us, many of those will be occurring starting at the bus stop. So we're doing everything from, so just so you know, and I know Cheryl knows, but many people are not from California that may be listening. So just so you're aware, we not only have the California Department of Health advisory and guidelines, but we also have guidelines that have been presented to us by the California Department of Education. So one thing that we know to be true is try to mitigate and identify and know when a student or a staff member is sick as soon as possible. So we will be taking temperatures and looking for symptoms of our students and staff, either when they get on the bus or when they come into campus. So that will be the first thing that occurs. We are, we will be doing similar to what Cheryl mentioned, we will be doing a staggered start to where we have students coming in according to grade levels or according to cohorts, depending on if it's a high school or not. We will be asking students, especially older students, to be wearing masks. So currently in Santa Cruz County, that is still a mandate for us. So our students, if you go out in public here in Santa Cruz County, you are required to be wearing a mask, especially if you're in a public location. So we will be having students do that. We'll be having hand washing stations, which will be throughout the campus, but also upon entry to the campus. What we know is that that's one of the best determinants, right? For the buses, we're going to have hand sanitizer that will be there because we won't be able to ensure hand washing when we get there. So monitoring and screening is going to be very important. We're making sure that students and staff understand the health and safety protocols. We are going to be implementing physical distancing and then also cleaning and sanitizing. So we are focusing on our K-5 students for return to school, prioritizing their return to school for the reasons that I already stated. What that will allow us to do is that will allow us to double up on both custodial, bus drivers, campus supervisors, nursing staff, and that will now be able to focus on the elementary. So we're very much taking the Norway and Singapore guidance, which is that we do our first wave of in-person physical should be your younger students. And then when we move to medium, so for us, we have a high, medium, and low risk scenarios. When we move to the medium risk, then we will begin to introduce our secondary students. And so I think for us, when we did the survey with the parents and the teachers and the students, what was the most interesting is that the survey, regardless of who it was, had the three most important fall considerations were 1, 2, 3, the exact same 1, 2, 3. 1, minimizing health risks to students and staff. So we will have signs, directional, kind of think about what supermarkets are doing, right, with having signage and having things lined up so people are having physical distancing. We are consistency on how students engage in learning was number 2, even with students. So how do we ensure that that's happening? And then the third, which is teachers and staff are adequately trained. So we're making sure that we're training our staff before school starts in order to really understand all the local and state health official guidelines, and that we're adhering to that. And then we will do the same with the students in terms of really doing it through protocols and routines where we teach students how to do it. And I really feel that, and then I'll stop and let Cheryl speak. I really feel that students are already there. So I was walking on the beach, physically distancing, of course, and I heard a child say, probably he was 5, 6 years old, turn to another child who is not part of his family, and he said to the person, physical distance, please, right? So I think whether that's a bad sign or a good sign, it shows that people can become, regardless of their age, aware of their surroundings and also the challenges of the virus.
Right. I absolutely agree. Now, before I have you go, Cheryl, there's a question that came in from Lauren Kimler. I'd like her to ask her question so you can answer it, and then we can sort of do like a last round of comments before we end off today. Go ahead, Lauren. What district are you with?
Portland Public in Oregon. I was wondering about specific plans for incoming kindergartners. I know a lot of our kindergartners are not registering because their parents don't want them to have their first school experience be virtual or with a teacher who's wearing a mask and not have that social interaction, which is such a big part of kindergarten. So I was wondering if these superintendents had any ideas or any specific plans about that.
For our kindergarten in Milpitas, our teachers are reaching out to the families and building on something we've always had, which is before kindergarten begins, the teacher reaches out to the kindergarten families and does a getting to know you and also an individual assessment of each child. So they're planning to do that as much as they can, either socially distanced or virtually. And we are not going to have our teachers wear facial coverings. We're going to have them wear the plastic facial shields because our public health officer representative here in Santa Clara County stated that that would most likely be acceptable. And the reason we're doing that is because, as you know, in teaching kids to read and also for language development, it's important to be able to see their teacher's lips. And in addition to that, to have that facial recognition is so much nicer than having a cloth over somebody's nose and mouth. So we're going to do that for our kindergarten and also our transitional kindergarten. And it is amazing. I have a few kindergarten teachers whose classes I observed this spring, and they're in a dual immersion program. And the kindergartners were doing great. And they were excited and they were able to connect with the teacher. And so sharing those live examples, videotaped of course, is another way that we're helping our parents to see that it is possible to still have a good learning experience coming to school rather than staying home and waiting another year.
Totally agree with all that. So I'm going to be wrapping up here and coming back for final comments from the two of you, and then also Tony. Want to make sure that everyone knows that Learning Council has our social media site up. The mobile app is about to go into the mobile market. I'm telling you this because we're building out over the summer the new digital learning experience standards, which are sort of a little stair step above what happens with the ISTE standards, if you're familiar with those, acknowledging quality UI UX so that people can understand what they're looking at when they're looking at some of the high quality digital curriculum. And then You're free to take any of the courses of the Edu Jedi. All the courses are in the No Story site. You can join as an Edu Jedi on the Learning Council site, but you can get free access here and take any of those courses to find out what the future looks like and understand things like analytics and all that. Want to really thank Dr. Michelle Rodriguez from Pajaro Valley School District in California. Excellent leadership, Michelle. And I'm very proud of you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you for all your support.
Yeah, and Cheryl Jordan from Milpitas Unified, thank you as well. Excellent leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And Michelle, I need to come out and see what you're doing out there since you're not too far from me.
Yeah, sounds good. We're not too far from each other.
Yeah. And then Tony, any last words from you from Lightspeed?
All I was going to say is I really appreciated what Cheryl had to say just regarding the use of masks and the importance of the visual cues of the teacher's voice. And if there's anything we can do from an audio perspective to help and support your schools as you're returning to school, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I know Leilani has my contact information, and we'll be happy to help with whatever scenario you may have.
Yeah, thanks all of you for joining us today. Want to make sure you know that in the last series that we will do this year, the Back to eSchool Tactics discussions, and that one is focused on being built for instant remote, any student, any staff, because who knows what's going to happen in the fall? No one. So we're setting that together. We have a couple of other topics we're going to do before the end of the year, but this is goodbye for now. So thank you all for joining, and hope to see you again on another webinar. Goodbye, everyone.